Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to our fourth webinar, Generative AI and PPC. My name is Sierra, and I'm the marketing manager here at Altitude. And if you don't know who Altitude is, we are a B2B marketing agency that focuses in the life sciences, established manufacturing, and software. And today, Adam has a great topic in store today, and I am going to toss it to him to kick it off.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zira. And thank you all for tuning in here today. This is our fourth webinar this year. We've had a great reaction so far. In particular, we had a great reaction to our very first one, which was about generative AI and SEO. So what we've done today is expanded that topic to include the other side with search advertising. Now, on the SEO side, we were talking about everything down here, below where it says sponsored. Today with PPC or search advertising, we're talking about what turns up, particularly in Google, with the little label that says sponsored. Now, PPC, search advertising, these often get conflated. I tend to use them interchangeably. They're not technically the same thing, but at the end of the day, what we're covering here is anytime you're bidding on someone seeing your ad when they search for something on Google. Now, for better or worse, this has gotten a lot more complex over the years. Frankly, it's gotten really complex here in 2024, but generative AI has made things a lot easier. There's a lot of talk these days about how Google search doesn't work, Google search isn't delivering results, and there's certainly areas where that's true, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But Gen AI, as I said before, is really helping. Now, the places where it doesn't work, you're often talking about terms and you're talking about topics and keywords that can be used in a whole lot of different ways, or they're simply very broad, not in the broad match sense, but in the sense that they could mean a bunch of different things. Or they could be used for the types of services that aren't easily purchased fast. Often professional services could run into this. And there's a bunch of other industries where Google search can be, frankly, really difficult to get good results from. Those, I would say, are bad use cases. But when the use case is good, and there are a lot of businesses, a lot of sectors, and a lot of industries where Google search is very much still viable, using generative AI is absolutely imperative. You can't not. So where are we in terms of the Google search advertising ecosystem? I mentioned before that it's significantly more complex than it used to be. Number one, and I think this is probably the most important for today's discussion, is the amount of manual control that we as advertisers have over what shows when someone searches for something is significantly smaller than it used to be. It used to be very much that I would deliver a specific ad group or even a specific ad verbatim with a specific match type. So broad match being basically anytime somebody searches for something kind of like this, phrase match being a little more specific than that, and exact match being technically the exact same words. I would deliver a verbatim ad copy and Google would try to show that at the right time. I would also negative out terms effectively line by line. So I like when they look for this, but when they add that word, it doesn't work. So don't show it there anymore. That level of control no longer exists. Effectively now with Google search advertising, we're suggesting to Google what we want. Generally, the push has been much more on Google's side toward broad match and toward letting its AI and its predictive analytics determine what shows for each user. And that's the personalization that I mentioned here. Google wants to tailor the experience as much as they possibly can. They're very reliant on their technology to serve an ad that is customized, even within the creative itself, to a specific user. So are we able to control it the way we used to? We're not. It's much more about the person on the other end of the screen than what we want necessarily. And again, we'll talk about why that means AI needs to come to the party. And the other piece that really matters here is the reach of the Google search ad ecosystem. It used to be that Google search ads were Google search ads and YouTube ads were YouTube ads and Gmail ads were Gmail ads, and they could come together in ways, but they were really separate. Now with Performance Max, which is, wouldn't necessarily say Google's new way of doing things, but it's the way Google wants you doing things, we're basically advertising in one place to cover all of those platforms with very similar creative setups for each of them. That means that, again, not only is the granular control gone, but we are effectively giving suggestions about what we want to show, kind of, and Google is tailoring it. So with Google in charge and the AI in charge, I would argue that it makes an awful lot of sense for us to be using our own AI to serve up what we want to serve up. The other big piece of this is user experience with Google search advertising. There was a time when creative really mattered, when the specific wording of ads could drive measurable impacts in click-through rate and ultimately in conversion rate. There are significantly more ads on search engine results pages than there used to be. And the ads have become much more relevant again to the user. The impact of that has been a degradation in how much it matters what specifically the ad says. Because again, remember, Google is trying to serve the ad for the user, not necessarily from the advertiser. So they all end up sounding very similar. The upshot here is a lot of what we're doing when it comes to the advertiser side is trying to maximize our visibility and not put anything in the ad that would harm CTR. Again, versus the old way where we were trying to drive CTR actively. So if we're able to use AI tools in ways that we'll talk about to maximize visibility, to not hinder CTR, we've very much done our job at that point. This is not the place where the language needs to be literature. We're not really telling a story in a search ad specifically. The search ad is effectively a form of behavioral targeting. If someone searches for X, I want to be there. I need to maximize the chances that someone is going to see me, the chances that they're going to click on my specific ad. At that point, my website takes over. I need the job done there from a conversion rate optimization perspective. Am I going to necessarily sell them or not with the specifics of the ad on Google search? Very much not so anymore.
And I think it's very important to emphasize here, Adam, how you mentioned the value behind the ad, right? Because ultimately the ad is to serve the user, and that's what Google is looking at. So it's very important that when using Gen AI or even our personal creativity, that we're keeping that user at the forefront.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of talking about the scale of AI. AI doesn't necessarily get it right every time. That isn't how the massive amounts of training data that go into large language models have actually manifested themselves. What it does is gives you this general, I call it mean of humanity. It's able to understand at a much greater level than you as one person are able to understand what a specific type of person might want. Because where you might have had 10 conversations with that specific type of person, AI has effectively had infinite conversations with that type of person. So delivering the stuff that Google needs to personalize is really what we're talking about. That's a great way to put it, Katsira. So specifically, where can we drive PPC or search ad efficiency with generative AI? Number one is keyword research. This is very much zero what you just touched on there. It's the ability to understand what a specific type of person might look for and the ability to extend that reach beyond what we're able to think of as people. Number two is another form of extension here. It's the creative itself. Again, 5-6 years ago, we would have been much more crafting ads individually, right? What specific story do we want to tell in this ad? Anymore, we're basically giving Google a series of headlines and asking it to tweak it, change it, and reorder it as it sees fit for user A, user B, and user C. So what that means is we actually have to deliver significantly more options in more ad groups and more campaigns than we used to. We have to be okay with the fact that we're a little bit out of control there. What is generative AI really good at? Generative AI is really good at working at, again, what I call this relative scale. When you go hyperscale, millions upon millions of variants, things can fall apart. But when we're talking about hundreds or thousands, it's beyond what a person can do reasonably or comfortably, but it's right in the wheelhouse of what a person can review, which is where you want to be. And the last part is data analysis. We, as humans, aren't necessarily that good at understanding this small to mid-sized type of data. Give me a spreadsheet with a few thousand lines on it in maybe 50 columns. I'm not able to comprehend that as a person. Now, I can make Excel do what I want it to do, but I'm still going to pick up on outliers. I'm going to squirrel right within the data and end up down rabbit holes that might not necessarily make total sense to go down. Feeding this data to the machine in natural language, which we'll talk about, is a much better way in a lot of cases for me to actually understand what's going on, to actually spot what I need to do, as opposed to just what looks interesting to me in the moment.
Now, Adam, keyword, right, is kind of a buzzword nowadays in the digital realm, right? Make sure you know your keywords or utilizing your keywords. Can you go into detail about how one finds the right keywords?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big fan, as you know, Zira, when I talk about AI, of bringing the fact that the advertiser or the executive or the scientist typically has a really good degree of subject matter expertise. You, Zira, know marketing like the back of your hand. Our scientific clients know their science, in some cases, literally better than anybody in the world. But what comes along with that, quite frankly, is bias. You speak a certain way about marketing. A scientist speaks a certain way about their specific scientific discipline. A manufacturer speaks a certain way about their industry or their sector. They have really honed language there. Is that the language that everybody uses? In most cases, no. It could be acronyms that are just unfamiliar to a broad audience or can mean multiple things to multiple people. It could be turns of phrase. Manufacturing is a great example of this, where manufacturing and industry and industrial are often synonymous, but not always. In cases like the sciences, right? Something as simple as life science versus life sciences, biotech versus biopharma. And then deep within the research, you start getting into things even down to data is versus data are, whether that is plural or not. It's these little things that we do as experts in our field and we understand that don't necessarily apply universally. Now, again, the generative AI data sets that feed the large language models, they do apply universally, right? They are effectively infinite. They're not truly infinite, but they're effectively infinite. And they're really good at helping you understand this general persona, right? What is this person like? So I'm a big fan of using ChatGPT 4 to ask it what a specific type of person, a specific job title, a specific professional in a specific sector might want. It's going to know, in a lot of cases, better than I will, what the average will want. Now, I'm always going to tweak that. I'm always going to tune that. There's a phrase in the AI community of always add human. I like here to start from robot, because it's going to start at a much bigger picture and a much higher level than I'm going to be able to. Now, the other side here, when the rubber hits the road with keywords, is about expansion. Again, we have myopic views of things. People are myopic, right? We look at things in our way. Can we necessarily see what's to our left or to our right? We can try, but we're frankly not very good about it. A computer, and specifically a large language model, understands a much broader set than we do. So again, the beauty here is natural language. I'm able to feed ChatGPT 4 a set of keywords and say, what else should I be looking at here? Could this mean different things to different people? Can you expand on this list? Where am I going to run into trouble here? And effectively conversing with that LLM through the ChatGPT 4 interface, I'm able to generate way more ideas than I would be able to otherwise. That then gets fed to Google, which uses its AI to serve the right creative to the right person. Now, there are some watchouts here with keyword research in particular. You do have to be clear and you have to be specific in what you're looking for. The value of generative AI with keyword research and keyword expansion in PPC is the fact that it can go bigger than I can. It can understand at a more base level in many cases than I can. I have to be very clear, though, about what I'm asking for, because otherwise it doesn't necessarily know my industry, my client's industry. It can get off the rails pretty fast. That said, I do have to trust it, right? There are times when, oh boy, do I exactly like that phrasing? Maybe not. It's not the way I would say it, but at the end of the day, I'm one person. A large language model is a representation, effectively, of millions or billions of people. I do, to an extent, have to trust it. And in a perfect world, I'm going to create my own tooling. This is where GPT-4 is very strong, the ability to create custom GPTs that I can train and show exactly what I want and that learn over time. So for instance, if this is something I'm doing a lot of, where I'm giving a topic and a list of keywords and looking for expansion, it would make a lot of sense for me to build my own custom GPT, train it on that, tell it exactly what I want, give it some examples, and keep using it and let it hone its own process while I hone my human process alongside it. Now, the other side of the coin, I don't ever want to assume expertise from a large language model. Again, GPTs are very good about understanding the average and delivering the average. Just because they give you an answer or an answer fast doesn't mean it's actually the right answer every time. So I can't assume it knows more than me. I can assume it knows broader than me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's super important to definitely review what Gen AI is throwing out at you, right? Because like Adam said, it's not always going to be right. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're bringing our own human value to the responses that we're getting.
Yeah, totally. Right. And the other side of that coin is not injecting bias. It's very easy for me to feed a machine 10 things, to expand it to a list of 100, and then go and say, you know what? I only like 2 of those other 90, right? 88, these are total junk. That's my own bias, right? That's just the way I like to talk about things. That's the phrasing I like to use. That's the specific words that I use in a given context. I have to be careful about that. You want to be skeptical, right? But you don't necessarily want to go too far where now, again, it's not helping my workflow, right? It's not helping me expand what I'm able to do as a person, which is the real value here. But again, the other side of that is accepting blindly, right? I don't want to say, hey, all of this is right because it came from an LLM, because it came from AI. I have to review it and be skeptical, but not necessarily too far where, I'm just trying to review it and just removing the fact that, I, again, trying to extend my reach and think broader than I possibly can as one person. On the creative side, the rubber can really hit the road when you understand that Google, again, in search ads, is very much picking the right message for the right user, or at least what it thinks is the right message for the right user. This could be the order of the headlines. It could be specifically what it shows. It's using predictive analytics and its own data to try to understand what is going to maximize clicks and maximize user happiness, because Google makes its money literally on clicks and big picture on user happiness. I have a pretty good idea in most cases what's going to make a user happy. Google will typically have a much better idea because it sees a lot more than I do. Your AI or my AI, even mass market AI, is very much going to approach it the way Google's AI does. So again, it makes sense to start with the AI when ultimately the AI is making the decision about what's being shown. This goes back to the previous work there on the keyword side of things. You want to be skeptical, right? You don't want to accept blindly, but you do want to say, hey, right, at the end of the day, if I can create 50 ad groups in the time it would have taken me to do 5, I have a much better chance now of Google understanding what I'm doing and matching a little bit more correctly the right thing to the right user. It has that broad understanding. If I use my AI to deliver more to it that starts with robot, right, it really works. And this is especially important, again, when the user isn't necessarily paying all that much attention. The thing I'm buying with search ads, first and foremost, is my brand showing up first. My creative, what it actually says, is probably going to be pretty similar to the other 3 or 4 ads on that search engine results page, because again, Google in a lot of ways is actually creating those ads on the fly. So if I'm able to do more, deliver it something that it likes a little bit better, and do that at scale, makes a lot of sense, right? My AI talking to its AI with a little bit of human input is theoretically better than just me trying to pick, right, based on my squishy human brain, or an AI with absolutely no human input whatsoever, because at that point I'm possibly losing the user and I'm completely losing the subject matter expertise that someone like Sierra or a scientist brings to the party. And the last piece is the data analysis side. Again, you can make Excel do a lot of really exciting things. You can make Google Sheets do a lot of really exciting things, and you can get really good results out of it. But as I mentioned before, we have a tendency as people to get lost. We have a tendency as people to hyper focus on certain things, see something that interests us and go down that rabbit hole, but miss the big picture, or just simply not focus on the right stuff. ChatGPT doesn't really have that problem. So feeding a CSV to ChatGPT, which you do just by dragging and dropping and uploading, is really easy. It's also really good from the perspective of being able to interface in natural language. Hey, ChatGPT, what's important here? What trends do you see? And what times of day are my ads actually performing the best? Where do you see a correlation between click-through rate and conversion? Which of these ad groups are really delivering ROI for me? Feeding it the data for that first pass is really, really good in terms of efficiency. You can do a lot more faster because you're interfacing with the data in natural language rather than having to use analyst tools. It can also, again, be significantly better than a human because even an analyst is going to benefit from this. Even an analyst is going to do their job a little bit better, a little bit more efficiently, and avoid some of the pitfalls of what humans have when we look at large or mid-sized data sets. So what do we have from here now that we're about 20 minutes in? Number one, it's important to remember in the PPC world, in the search ad world, that things are very different than they used to be. We used to be able to deliver a very specific message, a very specific piece of creative to someone who searched for a very specific term. We had knobs and levers we could pull and turn and really control at a granular level what happened. Those days are gone. We're now making suggestions to Google. We're asking it very nicely. It's the one holding the controls. The robots are in charge. They're in charge of delivering the user experience that Google wants to deliver to make the money that Google wants to make. The more we can understand that, and the more that we meet it in the middle with us plus our robots versus just us, the better off we're going to be. But critically, you still matter. This is a very similar message to how we finished up our SEO and Gen AI webinar a few months ago. You can't take yourself out of an SEO workflow and let the robots do their own thing. The March 2024 Google update has shown that very clearly. In this case, you still need to be driving. You need to start things. You need to help things along. You need to edit things. You need to be skeptical. But you need to bring that robot to the process very, very early. Use it where it makes sense, where it can do more than you. It can be faster than you. It can potentially help understand and analyze and bring this main concept to the table a little bit better than you can. But ultimately, when it comes to search ads, if it's you plus the robot plus Gen AI, you can do a lot of things. You do a lot of things very well. And ultimately, you can make this work for you in 2024 and beyond.
Those were great insights, Adam. And as generative AI continues to progress, it is super important that as professionals, we understand how to use it in combination with our own human creativity. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. We have about 16 more webinars to go in honor of our 20 for 20. And if you have not yet subscribed or liked our YouTube channel, please do so and check out our other webinars. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.